I'd be a good spokesman for products. Anyway, we have an interesting requirement for English 1101, and that is the use of scholarly sources. Now, scholarly sources, what exactly are they, and why are they useful, and how should we use them? Well, I enjoy this conversation a lot more than I really should, because this, again, kind of like the whole research angle, is something that I find really interesting regardless. It's kind of my bread and butter, and it's something I don't get to dabble in as much as I would like to. But anyway, one of the requirements for this class, according to like the state standards, is that we utilize and we discuss scholarly sources. But when you actually talk about inserting scholarly material into student writing, it gets a little wonky. Like, it gets a little messed up and strange, because a lot of students, and I'm talking about this from personal experience. This isn't a comment on you. A lot of students, when they come into college, are not ready to really read or use a scholarly source in the way that they should. And part of that comes from the fact that most students really don't even understand what they are. So before I give you like a big assignment to do with scholarly sources and ultimately insert them into your writing, which is another kind of the fun ways that we can expand the writing. So, keep that in mind as I'm discussing this with you. I like to give you an idea of what these things are and the place that they serve in the academic conversation. So, what is a scholarly source and how do we obtain them? Well, a scholarly source is a peer-reviewed piece of material typically. There is a little bit of wiggle room on this definition, because a lot of times when you access a scholarly database, which in this class we're going to use Galileo because it's the one that you should directly have access to with the school. It's giving you access to peer-reviewed periodicals. Let's define both of these terms real quick. Peer review basically means that, actually, let's not do that one yet. Let's do the simple one first. What is a periodical? A periodical is just basically any type of publication that's released on a semi-regular basis or a regular basis. Equivalents in the real world would be things like magazines. Magazines typically come out something along the lines of once a month, right? And you can expect them to be released on that timeline, and they're a regular publication. Newspapers are periodicals. Magazines are periodicals. Sometimes you have an anthology that's released once a year. So, those things go through an editorial process, right? They're selected from submissions from multiple different types of authors, or you have authors working on some type of board to release that writing. Scholarly material operates in a very similar way. It's a magazine, it's a book, it's some type of periodical that's released on a regular basis. Typically, they are home based on a university or college. I actually worked or really kind of interned on a scholarly journal when I was at Georgia Southern. It was really interesting because you don't really get to see how those things are made for the most part. I got to see how the academic sausage is basically made. So these publications have a panel of editors or a panel of experts that they assemble in order to select the material that's why am I having so much trouble talking this morning? You ever have that issue? I think I've had too much of this. Basically, this panel selects what goes into the periodical. So you have a panel of experts that's convened. Now, these experts, these editors that are assembled for the panel, these are typically people who have a great deal of prestige in the field. And these periodicals typically are centered around academic subjects within the college, right? So you've got journals for kind of everything. You got journals for mathematics, medicine, literature, economics. You also have journals for things like engineering, fashion, media, theater. You imagine it. There's some type of scholarly journal out there for it, because the whole purpose of the academy, the whole purpose of colleges and universities, is basically to generate the conversation and to generate these publications to forward the discipline, right? So that's essentially what you're getting and what you're looking for when you're talking about a scholarly source. A lot of students kind of assume that, well, can't a scholarly source just be something from a smart person? No, it really needs to be filtered through a more formal process. It needs to be selected. It needs to be curated by this peered review panel, right? Now, when I was in college, we had an attitude that these scholarly journals were pretty much the cream of the crop, at least in literature. And keep in mind, that's what my real background is. I didn't get really trained in writing. I was trained in English literature. That's the real broad area of my expertise. I actually published in an academic collection. So for a long time, that is considered like, if you really want an unbiased, if you really want a good, reputable source, that's where you go. Now, just for the sake of, why is my screen so bright? That's really weird. I don't understand what's going on there. Just for the sake of discussion, because I do find this stuff incredibly interesting. You don't want to just trust these periodicals as absolute gospel. That's not what their function really is. One of the ways that most people get published in these journals is not necessarily just by bringing up like a new discovery or a new viewpoint. You can often get published in these journals by taking issue with what someone has said before, right? So what these journals are looking for is a way to forward a conversation. So there's a lot of point counterpoint in these things, right? So just because they're published in these journals does not mean that you should automatically take them as gospel. A lot of people do, and that's not really what that's not really how we should handle them. They are part of a conversation. Now, these journals exist to be that kind of best of the best, at least the best of the best of where the conversation is headed. So when I got students who are exploring subjects and they have their writing and they all of a sudden have a requirement that's sort of put on them to shove in a scholarly article, which again, it's not the best way to do it, but this is one of the ways that I've seen a lot of these English classes go is, for some weird reason, we always shove research in at the very, very end. And I take issue with it, but it is traditionally how this is taught. I used to teach these English classes so that research is something we did consistently through the whole semester. I'd really like to go back to that because I think that's a little bit more reflective of what we need in the real modern world, is like that consistent relationship with information. But anyway, this writing is incredibly dry. It's typically built upon a developing conversation that is behind closed doors anyway. People typically don't get access to these types of journals in the real world. That's why you have Galileo to access them. Galileo is a system built by the University System of Georgia to allow you access to these journals, because in essence, the subscriptions to these things is incredibly expensive. And so the university, the college, and the technical college system pay for the subscriptions so that students have access to them and then they can use it, right? Now, that being said, you have what we philosophically call a sense of thoroughness. When you crack open a journal and you start reading through, no matter what the subject is, you're going to feel very disconnected with what's actually going on because it's part of a conversation that has essentially been denied to you. And so it really doesn't matter how much you know about the subject. Reading these articles for the first time is incredibly distressing because you're going to feel really stupid. Now, the reason I'm telling you this is because I don't want it necessarily to intimidate you the first time you crack this open. That is the nature of the thing, right? It's kind of for access and publication only for the elites who have been following this material for years and years and years. And it requires a great deal of work, and it requires a great deal of effort in order to just be caught up on the conversation that's being held. So students start reading these articles and they're instantly just absolutely discouraged by what they're seeing. That's normal. I remember when I was in grad school and I really started pouring through all these journal articles and reading stuff about William Butler Yeats, about Dylan Thomas, about Paul Klee, about these artists and all these poets. And I was like, I'm an idiot. I know nothing. That was when I was in grad school. I'd already gotten a bachelor's degree at that point. That's how unbelievably intimidating this stuff really can be. Now, for the purposes of this class, though, you're going to have to crack open a journal. And you're going to have to go in and you're going to have to find something to put into your paper. Accessing these journals is also kind of a pain in the butt. Galileo as a search engine, as a point of access for the database, is a lot better than it used to be when I was in grad school. Galileo, I think, predates Google, and it has a lot of pre-Google kind of search mechanisms. It can be very finicky and it can be very hard to use. The thing that I've always found that helps me is keeping the search terms broad and keeping an open mind as to where your subject is going to go when you're using Galileo. Because you really never know exactly what it is you're going to get. And it's built off of a conversation that has been happening for a long time, just like I said, right? Now, on that note, I tell students that since we're in the middle of the drafting process, don't be afraid for the material you pull from Galileo to be a little awkward when you put it in. And don't be afraid for it to feel a little shoehorned in, because, I mean, I remember even my experience as a grad student, like sometimes looking at the Galileo material and just desperately trying to find a way to fit in that conversation into the idea that I had. And it's extremely, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm the wordsmith. I'm the English guy. And sometimes I'm like trying to pick words out of the air, and it's really hard for me to do. Disorienting. Bam. That's a fun word. Anyway, it feels disorienting. It feels kind of like you've been kneecapped in a lot of ways. And I try to understand that. I remember how hard it was to use these things, even as somebody who considered themselves an English literature nerd. So for students who are accessing these things at the entry point, for somebody who's never accessed this before, it's intimidating. So don't feel bad. That feeling of being a little bit lost in the information is completely normal. Embrace it. It's okay. I'll help you get through that, right? I'll give you some guidance on that. Now, you access Galileo through Blackboard. You can log on to your Blackboard, and it's a single sign-on, which is really nice because we used to have like a whole password system in order to use that. I'm actually looking. I really need to find a way to screen share. I'm looking at the Blackboard landing page right now, and towards the bottom, there's Coastal Pines Technical College Library and Galileo. The link is there. You can use it. That's how you get in there. Now, just to kind of round this out a little bit, let's begin this assignment with something very general and easy. I want you to find 3 Galileo articles. Go into Galileo and search your topic. Keep it broad. If it doesn't intersect with your topic directly, don't panic. That's normal. So if you're following something really specific, I'm just, for the fun of it, let's talk about fashion. If you're talking about fashion and you're trying to argue that 70s style is going to return in a big way, I don't know. I know nothing about fashion. But and let's say you find something about the manufacture of bell bottoms in a factory somewhere, or let's even actually bring it back even more, like a fashion show that's going to happen in Munich or something like that, right? Those things do not 100% intercede with your topic, but they could still be useful. So I just want you to find some cursory topics that might have some type of connection with your material that we might be able to dig out later. Later, we're going to kind of work with these a little bit more, but right now I just want you to find 3 of them, put it in the discussion forum, and give me a little just quick summary of what these things say. This is going to require a lot of reading. It's not pleasant reading, but just, this is one of those things you're just going to have to buckle down and do, okay? You just got to just like really grind it, read it, and post it in the forum. If you have any trouble at all using Galileo, by all means, let me know, because I want to help. That's what I'm here for. I'm a teacher. I'm not just somebody who's supposed to just be sitting here yelling at you all the time. Although I say I enjoy that too. Anyway, you guys have a great day. I'll create the discussion forum, and I'm here if you have any questions. Obviously, we'll do our team sessions for some points. So be sure to show up for that. And I'm excited to see what you guys find.